Terrific. My panel's going to come on into the seat here, and we'll give them a nice round of applause thereafter. Excellent session there with Benedikt Sobota of the Eurasian Resources Group and looking at the supply chain and the future of mining. We haven't had a chance to take a step back at the Future Minerals Forum and just focus on the building blocks of the strategy of developing the mining sector here in the country, to finance it, to support it, and what it means into the feed through for gross domestic product, development, employment, but also, very importantly, how does it fit into the Vision 2030 as well? We have three guests on stage and one joining us virtually. Let's welcome Prince Sultan Khalid Al Saud, His Highness the Chief Executive Officer of SIDF. It's good to see him. His Excellency Engineer Saad Al Kab is the Chief Executive Officer of Saudi Exim Bank. Her Excellency Farah Ismail is the Deputy Minister for Sectoral and Regional Development Affairs. That's at the Ministry of Economy and Planning, with His Excellency Faisal Al Ibrahim. And joining us virtually is a good friend and somebody who's a very familiar face here in the Kingdom. Let's welcome Professor John Tsiafanakis from the Gulf Research Center. He's joining us from Cambridge because his children got struck with COVID and he wanted to make sure we're all safe in the building. Nice round of applause to all of you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
This was going to be an international panel and half with our colleagues from Saudi Arabia, but as it turned out, because of travel and the other panels, it became literally a focus on Saudi Arabia, but I'm actually thrilled about it. I think it's better for us to take the opportunity to drill into the different subject matters, which is extremely important. I wanted to start, if I can here, Prince Sultan, about the environment in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We've heard bits and pieces over the last 24 hours for international investors. And I've even had a domestic producer, Amak, the CEO, tell me in a fireside chat yesterday, it's an equal playing field. It sounds good on paper, but what is the role of SIDF and how do you see the international environment for investors to come in? If representation on the panel is anything, you can see most of the major CEOs have been attending. What is the reality here in terms of the environment for opportunity in this sector, but overall even?
Sure. Thank you, John. First, I think it's a pleasure to be here. But the short answer in terms of what has changed is quite a bit. And if we step back and look at what we've heard throughout the day yesterday, but also this morning, and consider the global context, realizing the energy transition and the aspirations associated with it in any meaningful way requires a massive amount of investment, but also ensuring the availability, affordability, and building resilience in key minerals and metal supply chains. Now, where is Saudi Arabia in all of that? And I think it begins with the Kingdom's vision of making mining the third pillar of the Saudi economy, but also boils down to a mining strategy that undertook certain initiatives across the board to make Saudi Arabia part of that global solution. And so the new revamped mining law creates a regulatory framework and legal framework that is conducive for business, but also one that is transparent and embraces key principles as it relates to sustainability, appropriate governance, and societal impact. The rest of the enablers, many of whom are represented obviously here today, relates to the availability of secure, affordable energy, the availability of funding via development finance institutions, SIDF, the Exim Bank, and the rest of the development finance ecosystem in the Kingdom, but also world-class infrastructure. Across the board, I think Saudi Arabia is well positioned, has a competitive offering to play, not only in extraction, processing, and refining, but also further downstream into manufacturing.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. If you just looked at it on the upstream, I don't think it would add the value that the Kingdom's looking to get. So thank you for that, Prince Sultan. We had a chance to talk at the FII, but that was in the general context of what the mandate is for the Exim Bank. But let's drill in, if we can, Specifically, how do you support the mining sector? And I think it's fascinating because you have a long history as an engineer by education, but as a banker. How has that translated into the export arena as a pillar, along with what we see from SIDF, supporting this effort and the transformation? I think most people wouldn't think it's the third pillar, but it absolutely is. But what is your role here? And even the news that we heard yesterday from Ma'aden and PIF, $15 billion to help other countries develop and to have stakes in the development and the growth of mining even outside the kingdom. Please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good morning, John. Welcome back to Riyadh.
Thanks.
Pleasure to be here with you.
I think it's becoming my second home, to be
Should be first home.
Yeah. Don't tell my wife that, so, by the way. My move away from the Middle East was to live with my family. So
And now we have cold weather for you. It's important. I mean, we are a young organization, 2.5 years old. But let's talk about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is blessed with a significant mining or mineral reserve with a financial value of $1.3 trillion. This is definitely beyond the local demand and internal use, which create a great opportunity for investors and export. We at Saudi Exim bring something unique to the table, to the key and for the key stakeholder of the mining industry, being investors, exporters, importers, and financial institutions. We are not only bridging their financial gap the conventional way, but also we mitigate their export risk through different insurance products and expanding their capability to reach a global market. And in numbers, in 2022, we have provided $1 billion, over a little bit over $1 billion of credit and insurance facility to the mining industries, and which is ultimately open an opportunity in a global market for the industry, and it was only our beginning in this sector.
Okay, thanks very much. Far Ismail, it's great to have you, by the way. And looking at how this builds in, I would like to finish our debate about Vision 2030, but let's start with the role of investment. We had His Excellency Khalid Al-Falih on the same panel yesterday, right? And he was talking about being an enabler for this industry. But how does the investment feed into the economy and the difference it makes? I think many people don't understand the multiplier if you have global players along with two enablers at the table here. How do you see it from the Ministry of Economy and Planning?
Sure, thank you very much, John. Very pleased to be with the esteemed panelists and with you today. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about investments in general and how it fits into the Vision 2030 overall. So as everyone knows, since the launch of the vision, the Kingdom has embarked on a number of corrective measures from a legislative and regulatory framework, and in fact, a comprehensive package of social and economic reforms was launched through the vision realization programs, but also through the number of integrated sectoral strategies, including the National Investment Strategy. I would say that investments come at the heart of Vision 2030, and His Royal Highness, when he launched the Crown Prince, when he launched the National Investment Strategy in late 2021, he launched it with an ambition and aspiration level that I would say not seen elsewhere in the world, with a very focused objective for the private sector to play a pivotal role in achievement of these targets. We want to become one of the top 15 economies in the world. This means that we need to increase our GDP to about $1.7 trillion by 2030. So catalyzing investments is crucial for the Kingdom to achieve these targets. And we will be tapping into different sources to achieve the investment target. I'm not going to drill into all the numbers in the National Investment Strategy, but the key number is $3.2 trillion will be injected in the economy through investments, be it from FDI, and increasing FDI as a share of GDP from less than 1% to 5.7%. Also through the funds, the Public Investment Fund and others. And a lot has been launched already, but also through domestic private sector and the many initiatives that have been launched to enable the contribution of the private sector, like the Sharik program, which is the collaboration between the government and large companies, and many other initiatives that have been launched over the past few years. And we've already seen a lot of targets being achieved. Now, where does mining fit into this? The mining sector stands to benefit a great deal from all these programs. We heard about the Global Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, which was launched recently. And mining and minerals are one of the 7 targeted sectors in this program or this initiative. Again, mining is one of the 4 key pillars of the National Industrial and Logistic Development Programs, which is one of the largest, I would say, or most strategic vision realization program. So mining will play a very crucial and important role in the achievement of all of the vision targets through investments and other initiatives.
Good, and we found out yesterday, I mean, the goal is to get a 4-fold increase from the 2021 level of $8 billion of investment, international investment into mining. So it's ambitious, but phenomenal. Let's bring in Dr. John Stefanikis joining us from Cambridge. It's good to see you, John. You stand here as a very large screen, so your presence is being felt. I wish I had you on the panel here. I think we should kind of deal with learning from legacies in different mining sectors around the world. It's almost great to start as a greenfield site because you don't repeat mistakes perhaps of other countries. How does that apply to the kingdom here? Learning from others, taking advantage of the geographical positioning, the new Silk Road that I talked about from East and Central Africa through the Middle East into Central Asia. How do you see it, John, in a macro sense here, picking up on Farah's comments?
Thank you, John. And I feel very humbled and honored to be at the panel, even virtually. I have a lot of respect for all the panelists because I worked with them in the past, and I see them all doing great things for the kingdom and for the institutions they work for today. So I think that Saudi Arabia clearly is looking at this from a unique perspective because it can look at the lessons learned and the mistakes and pitfalls of others and move forward. And like it did since the 1930s with the development of Saudi Aramco, of course, back then with the assistance of America. Today, it has the ability to learn from many years, decades of hydrocarbon experience and build its institutions. And I think it's very important that institutions are the key principle for a very strong and unique mining sector. Secondly, the regulatory environment. I think Saudi Arabia has taken important steps towards that. The mining law is an essential part of what it needs to do to attract investors because after all, it can really do a lot to invest domestically and internationally, but the international investors into Saudi Arabia bring a very important know-how, and that is very much needed. And finally, and not the least of all, it really needs to take a step of inclusiveness. And by that, I mean that it needs to participate. Certainly, the state needs to be at this point at the forefront, but including the private sector, both the local and the international, is an important principle because Saudi Arabia has a very essential goal to increase private sector participation by 2030 to 65% in terms of nominal GDP. But overall, I would say the key takeaway is strong institutions, because strong institutions bring capacity, bring human resources, and bring institutional memory that serves in so many ways to empower the country moving forward. And clearly, to me, the next 20 years for Saudi Arabia is to increase wealth for the population, but clearly moving away, as it has done over the last 15 years, from what we call resource curse to resource blessing. And I think this is what defines Saudi Arabia of today. It is a blessing to be involved in mining, and doing it now, it is a unique historic opportunity.
Yeah, it certainly is. Okay, thanks for that, John. So we have 15 minutes left. So I'm going to ask the panelists to be 75 seconds or less so we can cover all the different topics. You can even pick up off of each other. Dr. John talked about the institutions, Prince Sultan. Tell us about the reinvigorated role of the SIDF, because it is an institution like the Exim Bank. But what's astonished me, and I'm not just blowing smoke at the kingdom here, is you've taken institutions and then given them a mandate. You've been given a mandate. What do you see as the SIDF mandate?
Sure. So for those in the audience that don't know of SIDF, we're an institution that was established in 1974 as part of the first wave of development in the kingdom, primarily to provide long-term project finance to the manufacturing sector, and played a pivotal role over the past 48 years. So 74, manufacturing value add was 5 billion Saudi riyals. Today it's north of 400. With the kingdom's vision and the focus on the various sectors, mining being pivotal, we expanded our sector coverage to include mining, energy, and logistics. But John, I think I would love to have the opportunity to give the audience some validation points. So since the launch of the vision, the amount of lending that we've availed to the mining sector in particular has been north of 10 billion riyals. We expect that to accelerate significantly over the coming years and expect to be net lenders to the sector for the foreseeable future. The second part of it is, since 2016, with the launch of the vision, the amount of lending that we've done to the various sectors that we cover is more than what we've done in the first 35 years of our history.
Wow.
But it's not only the volume of lending, it's also the projects themselves. So we are the largest lender to the largest green hydrogen facility in NEOM. We are investing as well and lending to blue hydrogen, but also to 2 EV facilities and across many different product categories that we hope will add to the economic complexity of all the activities that we undertake in the economy.
Okay, very, very, very interesting. I think for also time, Saad, I think one of the things you wanted to address, because the issues come up, is ESG and making the connection of the Exim Bank supporting this to actually enhance environmental credentials, right? Because the role of minerals throughout the value chain, and you're a banker, how do you take it from the Exim Bank and say, this is necessary because it touches these different sectors? Do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, thank you, John, and it's a great question. It's the supply of minerals is very important for the sustainability of planet Earth. As per the latest World Bank report, that we require to produce 5-folds of the current production by 2050s. So that requires a lot of enabler from different governmental and commercial entities to enable this high demand for the sustainability, because technology depending on minerals, electrical vehicles and renewable energy components depend on minerals, and food security, which is very important, depend on minerals through the fertilizers.
Often left out of the discussion, right? It is often left out of the discussion, though, is it not?
Yeah. So again, sorry?
It's often left out of the discussion, the minerals for fertilizer, and we have an acute crisis because of Ukraine and Russia right now, right?
It's very important, and all those mines produce phosphate and other and potash, which is converted to the fertilizers. That's very important for the food security. So from our side, we need to enable this industry. Of course, the Ministry of Industry and Mining, they have their supervisory role for sustainable mining activities. The mining law that His Royal Highness mentioned here, that govern the operation. We in Exim Bank monitor and review ESG practices when we receive client requests and have more credit appetite for clients that have favorable ESG practices.
Yeah, one of the debates we had is what is the global standard? What is the magic standard? Because they're very different from the West all the way to Asia, and because Saudi Arabia straddles here between East and West, to land on what you think is a standard that you feel comfortable as a banker to lend to, I think is
So we follow,
really important.
definitely we follow the ministry standards on applying the ESG.
Oh.
And there is a common standard on this industry, so we are following it. As a matter of fact, we hired the ESG specialist in the bank and already started with us from 1st of January.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's interesting to know, actually. Thanks. Father, I think it would be interesting also to drill into the idea of how the mining industry feeds into GDP. And the reason I say it is I had 5 or 6 people come up to me and say, well, yeah, but nobody wants to work below the ground or be out, in the desert in the heat and, in this kind of dirty sector. I'm just saying that because of the dust and the hard work. But that's misrepresenting the opportunity here. If you look at from upstream to what you were suggesting, Prince Sultan, if you go all into the processing side of this and the engineering techniques and the geological surveys that are being done and the data being the new oil, as well as copper being the new oil, as Goldman Sachs was suggesting this morning, there is great opportunity in terms of GDP.
That's right. So historically, John, mining has always been a crucial component of the Saudi economy. And like you rightly said, the growth opportunities in mining are tremendous. And we've heard yesterday about the investment opportunities. The kingdom aims to attract around $32 billion of investments through 9 mining projects in midstream. As per the Saudi mining strategy, it is expected to create more than 250,000 jobs from mining alone by 2030. NIDLIP program, which is where mining is a key component along the other 3 components, industry, energy, and logistics, aims to increase its GDP contribution from, in 2021, around $4 billion to more than $45 billion in 2030. So there's a lot of effort between NIDLIP, between the Saudi mining strategy. A lot of initiatives have been crafted, including the exploration and many initiatives that have already been implemented, like the completion of the Arabian Shield geological survey, the mining law, which will facilitate financing and all geological activities. To His Highness' point on economic complexity, a key initiative also is the establishment of the value-added chain of mining, which will increase economic complexity and will help in the diversification journey of the kingdom. So instead of us exporting aluminium, we want to start exporting aluminium foil, for example. Instead of exporting copper, we want to start exporting copper wires. And there's a lot of initiatives under the Global Supply Chain Resilience Program and under NIDLIP that are have specific investment opportunities around that. So mining has always played a pivotal role in the kingdom's economy, but from now until 2030 and beyond that, there's a lot of growth opportunities out there.
Oh, it certainly seems that if you approach it at the start with that spirit in mind, I think is the difference here in the kingdom. Dr. John, I'd like to have you combine a couple of topics here. Number one is the inclusiveness that Farah was talking about here in terms of the value chain. If you have an inclusive value chain that creates greater impact on the economy. And in my opening comments, I talked about, learning the legacies of other experiments or developments around the world when it comes to mining. How do you get that right? An inclusive value chain and not, stepping into the pitfalls of perhaps being too upstream dependent and exporting raw materials. I think there's a very different approach here. It's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. One of the difficulties being the last panelist is that everybody else says all the things that you wanted to say, but this is wonderful because we are on the same page in so many ways. I think that what Farah said is essential and at the core of what Saudi Arabia is doing, and very much this is the lesson learned from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s of what Saudi Arabia got slightly less correct, if I can say this. But what is correct today for us was not correct back then. So in hindsight, yes, we can say that some of the things were corrective moves that are being done today. What do I mean by that? What Farah said is at the core, meaning that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Saudi Arabia exported the raw product. And today, Saudi Arabia is building capacity internally. So, for instance, it is trying to make a very serious bet on electric vehicles. And not only making a bet by having an investment outside, by bringing in the investment into the country. That is the example of Lucid. What goes into Lucid? It requires, the most important part is a battery. What goes into a battery? A lot of these essential rare earth minerals and other components that comprise the battery. What else goes into that? Well, it is different material, including aluminium and other products. In the old Saudi Arabia, the raw product, being the bauxite, could have been exported. In the new Saudi Arabia, it is thinking about the entire value chain. So that is important, because an essential principle to anyone's economy is not just to increase complexity, but make sure that it exports that complexity to what His Highness Prince Sultan said, that it's important to increase the value add, but also make sure you export that. And Saudi Arabia has made important strides towards that over the last 5 to 6 years, and it needs to up the game on that complexity. So very much it needs to not only, and this is an essential part of the complexity of the challenge that Saudi Arabia has, not only increase the FDI, but make sure it is transparent, which it has been, especially in the mining sector. It is very transparent. A lot of these data points on the geological surveys are now widely available. This is a unique opportunity, and it is a first. Secondly, governance is very important. Saudi Arabia has made essential strides, very important strides. No one else in the emerging markets that I monitor has made such strides in governance. So it is a very different country, hence investors will come in. Once investors come in, the product changes because you increase the value chain, because then Saudi Arabia is part of the global supply chain of product. So it's no longer producing material for somebody else to increase the value of those materials. It is producing them and wants to produce them as part of its localization strategy. Excellent things that Saudi Arabia is doing today. Thank you.
And I'd say excellent analysis that didn't step on anything that Farah had to say. So that's pretty quick thinking, Dr. John. I'm going to say thanks, but you can listen in to the last question here. And I want to pepper this young team. I'm going to challenge you because we have 2 minutes and 20 seconds left. So when I mean 30 to 45 seconds, that's what we mean, all right? I'm going to start with Farah. I had, as emerging markets editor for CNN for so long, I had a chance to see a lot of 2030, 2040, 2050 plans. But what stands out for me here is that this was not a plan that was launched and forgotten. Can you give me your experience in 45 seconds? Is it the North Star at the Ministry of Economy and Planning, and that's the narrative through all the key ministries? Farah?
Thank you, John. It's very difficult to answer this question in 30 seconds.
Let's make it happen.
I'm going to try. So I think Vision 2030, when it was framed and structured, it was structured in a way that fundamentally focused on tackling challenges that the Saudi economy is facing today. We have a system of government that has a long-term perspective. At the strategic level, we are highly centralized, so everybody can rally behind this vision. The difference between us and other plans is that we know our challenges and we are tackling these challenges with specific metrics, specific KPIs, and very detailed plans and strategy. I'm going to give you some examples.
There's a lot of time for that. Do you want
Okay, so I'm going to be very brief. The Vision 2030 focused on many challenges, diversification away from oil. We have specific metrics that talk about that, and it's no longer plans on paper. There's a lot of initiatives that have been launched, and we're already down from 60% in the 1980s of oil and gas contribution to GDP to around 35%.
Wow.
We want to include the whole population in the achievement of this vision with very clear targets. Unemployment has always been, among Saudis has always been very high in the kingdom. The participation of women in the labor force has always been one of the lowest in the world. How can we achieve this transformation without including and tapping into every single talent in our society? Unemployment among Saudis already dropped from 11.6 to 9.9%. The objective is to get to 7% by 2030. Women participation in the labor force, the target was to increase from 22 to 30%. We are already beyond that target. We reached 37% as of Q3 2022.
Yeah.
So the difference is that we are tackling our challenges, but this is the scientific answer. The real answer also is that we have leadership who really believe in this direction and is rallying the whole country, society, the people, the investors, and the residents around this objective. So it's no longer plans on paper, it's a lot that has been achieved and a long way to go as well.
So I think you actually have the dynamic voice, the knowledge, and everything for television, but you went 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So we blew right through it. So I'm not going to hire you as an anchor, but I'll have you as the economic analyst on CNN would be a good thing. I think it's a fair comment.
That's a very emotional question for everyone in the audience. That's why.
Well done. And I'm sure our two gentlemen on the stage don't need to step in because I think we heard that. But you hit all the touch points. I'm pretty confident SIDF and Saudi Exim Bank, I think, live by the same spirit of the 2030. I have to stick to time because I've got my magic director, Pauline, talking to me and say, let's go. Can we give a really nice round of applause to Prince Sultan, Saad Al-Kaab, Farah Ismail, and Dr. John Stefanikis. Thanks very much. You can talk to her back behind the scenes on the 2030 plan. Thank you.
We're happy to see our time to her.
I know. It's great that she's leading, but we have to have some fun with it all the time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Farah, thanks very much.
Thank you, John.